Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby. Alphalist is a closed community with over 300 CTOs that share their knowledge and experience in a Slack space and at events. With this podcast, we want to give our members and interested parties insight into the thoughts and ideas of top CTOs. If you're interested in becoming a member of the community, visit alphalist.com to find out more on how to apply. This episode is kindly supported by Fastly, the biggest challenger in the CDN market. Fastly is pushing ahead the technical boundaries and is, from my perspective, the best solution on the market. Fastly is known as one of the key drivers of the Edge Cloud movement. In one of the next podcasts, I will talk to Tyler McMullen, Fastly CTO, about WebAssembly and the Edge. Well-known customers of Fastly are Shopify, the New York Times, Reddit, GitHub, and many, many more. If you want to try it all with first-class support, just go to fastly.com/alphalist. Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I'm your host, Tobias, and today with me is Peter Grosskopf. Peter Grosskopf is the CTO of Börse Stuttgart Digital Exchange, a guy that I know for 10 years, I would say. And we finally met 2 years ago. So beforehand, we knew each other virtually. And I kind of followed him because he's somehow in the Rails scene. And like you follow each other in a way. Peter, I'm very proud to have you here today. And I'd like you to introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks, Toby, for having me here. Great pleasure to speak on the podcast. Yeah, I'm Peter Grosskopf. I'm currently CTO at Börse Stuttgart Digital Exchange. I somehow still find funny how I managed myself into financial service industry because when I studied information systems at University of Münster back in the days, I was more focusing on technical topics, so doing a lot of coding. The interest in coding brought me to Ruby on Rails in 2005 when I read the first book about it. So I started to work on small startup projects, started to work in a startup in Düsseldorf in 2007, selling T-shirts online. And this turned into a small software development company that was focusing on building software with Ruby on Rails in an agile way, which was back in the days, so in 2008, not that common that you were working with contractors also from the enterprise industry and working in an agile and non-waterfall way. So that caused us a lot of discussion upfront to really work the way we did. But in the end, it was always a good idea. After 5 years doing that company, I decided to move on and to do something new. So I moved to Berlin 6 years ago and joined a company builder, so the company builder Hitfox, as a CTO. And Hitfox was at that time focused on building ventures in the advertising industry, so ad tech. But a week before I joined the club, there was a decision made to found FinLeap, which is nowadays the biggest company builder for Fintech ventures. And so this switch into financial service industry hit me on that job, so that I was building prototypes for new ventures with my team. And it was, for example, also Zavedo, Clark, and all these early FinLeap ventures that we built. And working in this fintech environment and also figuring out that it's in many situations required to collaborate with banks and to have kind of joint projects. And banks are traditionally moving relatively slow due to a lot of reasons. Then the decision was made to found a bank from scratch, which was Solarisbank. And I had the pleasure to join the project team in the very beginning. And I also joined on a permanent basis when it was a team of about 5 to 7 people. And we built up kind of this application process for getting a banking license at BaFin. And at the same time, we built up a tech stack that we were able to run our business after 9 months. from kind of the very start of the project. So we received the banking license in less than a year, and then 1 month later we were able to go live with the banking system. So that was quite amazing. But still, it was also an amazing journey to see the company grow to 280 people over 3.5 years and serve a lot of clients, as it was an API bank, so where other fintech companies were able to integrate. And at the time at Solarisbank, I also got intrigued by the blockchain space because I wrapped my head around the fact, how would banking look like in a decentralized world? Because banking traditionally is a very centralized service and also a very unopen space to let other parties or entities connect to it. And while figuring that out and building up a bit of business also in the blockchain space at Solarisbank, I got in touch with the people from Börse Stuttgart. And so I like their approach because they have a big vision in also to digitize their full ecosystem of trading topics and move it to blockchain space and decentralization. So I joined 1 year ago, and I'm pretty happy to now run a business also as an MD again. So I'm one of 2 MDs, but also responsible for the technical topics and building up the company from scratch.
So if I understood it correctly, first you built the first German API first bank, and now you're building the first German API first exchange. Is that correct, or?
Yeah, so I wouldn't call it API first now with BSDEX, because we also provide a front end for traders so that they can sign up with our platform and use us through an UI or through a user interface. But so with Solarisbank, it was the first API-based bank in Germany, and especially built to be focused on serving fintech ventures in a B2B2X in business model. And so what I kind of find funny in this regard is so first you could call it like I helped to start a bank, and now I'm having to start an exchange. So it's I think this at least makes sure that I cover the majority of topics that you can deal with in financial service industry.
So I guess you know a lot about regulations, right? Throughout the years now.
Definitely, but I must say that the regulatory topic and also compliance topics kind of became one of my hobbies. Also at the time at Solarisbank, because when we built up the company from the very beginning, I was thinking about like, how do I manage to build up a tech team that does not feel like working in a bank? So I wanted to create like a developer experience or like a developer life that is more like working in Spotify or Soundcloud, and not like feeling in like working in the bank. And usually compliance processes, so like 4I principles and double checks processes and so on, stand a bit in the way of coding principles like continuous delivery and so on, where you kind of roll stuff out and you see what is the impact, and then you roll back just in case. So this industry doesn't work like that. And I read a lot of books about compliance, and I really dig deep to understand what's the requirement. And then I started to formulate kind of processes and ways of working to deal with it. And I think in the end, we managed pretty well at Solarisbank, so that developers feel like working in a tech company. But that's also some knowledge that I now can also use with my new company here. So we were able to set up a lot of processes and procedures in a very quick way because I already did it before.
I think it's like a dream of the typical guy working in IT in a bank to start from scratch, right? I think that's also worth a lot if you don't have any legacy as a bank and can just start from scratch, just begin something new.
Yeah, it's about starting from scratch. That's probably the one aspect, but also to break with some of the theories that have been there for 20 years. because I remember one discussion in the very beginning of Solaris, when I talked to my kind of boss, so kind of the representative in the managing board responsible for tech, and we were talking about data centers. And so he said, like, hey, in the banks I worked before, we had this double sync data center with multiple locations and so on, and we build up an infrastructure like that to be available all the time. And then I said, hey, that's interesting that banks have that requirement to be available all the time, so for sure. But look at companies like Spotify. So they don't have regulation and they're not forced to be online all the time, but they do it because it's the impact, because or it would have a negative impact on the customer experience. So and now I then told them, hey, so let's see, or let's look at what they're doing to be available all the time, and they do it in a different way. And then I started to port these ideas to the banking space. And in the end, it's not about like there's written somewhere that you need to have 2 data centers. That's not the requirement. The requirement is to be online all the time and available so that people can get out their money and so on. And you usually in technology have 5 ways or even more to make sure that this requirement is fulfilled. And I think in the end, working in financial service industry is always about dealing with these different paradigms that are coming from the past and translating them to the ways you would do it today. And I think then you usually will always find a way to compromise or find the right trade-off to use new technology and new approaches, and at the same time fulfill the requirements that are put towards you.
So take a look at the maximum possible, I guess, right? So I guess you can't like easily host in every public cloud. Is that correct? Or
yeah, but even that one is moving. So we've been part of the first discussions between kind of a group of financial service providers with BaFin and also with some of the cloud providers, so like AWS, and talking about kind of group audits and what requirements should be put up to make group audits possible. Because in banking industry, you, for example, need to make sure that the auditors can inspect the data centers, and you can imagine that it's not something that AWS and Google take easily, because it's highly secure rooms, and so usually they wouldn't let anybody in there, also to make sure that their security is right. And if 1,000 banks want to walk into the data center and make an inspection once a year, it would mean that they would have 3 inspections every day, and that's of course not capable. And so in the end, the industry, so some financial service industry plus the cloud industry plus the regulators, found ways to manage also with such topics. And therefore, a couple of banks are moving in the cloud these days, and also other financial service companies are moving into the cloud, and also so do we. So we go with a hybrid setup at the moment. So we make use of the data centers of Börse Stuttgart at the moment for our main traffic, and we, for example, build up our data platform on AWS, but also we are willing to move more and more service to the cloud, because we see big benefits in it.
What could I actually trade through Börse Stuttgart Digital Exchange?
So the big picture is that we want to become Europe's biggest exchange for digital assets. So what are digital assets in the beginning? So for us at the moment, it's Bitcoin. So you're able to trade Bitcoin against euro on BSDEX. And in the very near future, you will be also able to trade further cryptocurrencies on our platform, so like Ether and Ripple. And so that's kind of the first step for us. So we launched with Bitcoin because we're developing our own trading technology. So we're not built on top of any third-party solution. So it's kind of, we have the full ownership in our code, and we built the matching engine and the order processing and so on completely on our own. So therefore, we wanted to start with a kind of as MVP-ish you can be in with such a service, and also to see that everything is working correctly. And now we roll out to more currencies, and on the long run, we want to drive forward this whole sector that's now handled in the blockchain space, at least for the last 2 years, where people are looking into the creation of new kind of financial instruments. So, for example, because you can tokenize or digitize with blockchain almost anything that you can own or where you can have a usage right. So, like a license. And for example, you can own a car, you can own a share in a company, you can own some sort of derivative financial instrument. You can have a flight ticket that you can sell, so you can have also a fractional ownership in a piece of art. So, for example, you can own like a fraction of a Picasso painting or a fraction of a real estate apartment in Rio de Janeiro, and that's the beauty of the technology, that these standards to create these new kind of financial instruments are to the public, and they're open. So issuers around the globe are able to create those assets. But especially for assets that are legally seen as securities, so Wertpapiere in Germany, you need to have there's like a special set of regulation applied, and with the setup that we have also with Baden-Württembergische Wertpapierbörse GmbH, which is the Trägergesellschaft of the public stock exchange of Stuttgart. We can provide in the future a setup where people can trade such new financial instruments on BSDEX.
Okay. So in long term, it's possible that it's also for stock trading, that it's basically for trading real estate and so on, if I understand correctly. But I guess that's not your scope, right? Especially not real estate. But
yeah. So in the end, we won't be the platform that does this tokenization, because in the end, there are already now quite a number of companies specializing on creating those tokens and financial instruments, but they get listed somewhere so that you create a liquid market, because you can imagine. So if you have, for example, some startup stocks or shares, usually they're not traded in a liquid market. So they're the financing rounds, and then probably there's a secondary, and you can sell some of your shares. But in the end, it's not a real liquid market. And you could imagine that in the future you can do like an equivalent to an IPO on the blockchain, so you can make such shares available to the public,
like the ICOs that were being done like 2 years ago.
Yeah, the ICO is. So I tried to avoid the name because it's. I think it's a bit burned. It's a bit burned because I think people were overly fascinated over the technology and were not thinking about what they tokenized. And in the end, in the ICO phase 3 years ago, there was a lot of stuff tokenized which doesn't have a real intrinsic value. For example, utility tokens, so like kind of usage rights for whatever platform. But when it comes to tokenization of real estate and company shares and so on, there's some value behind it, and in the end, I also see. This would also be a bit of democratization for the financial markets when people are able to also, like if my mother would be able to buy some shares in a let's say, mature startup, but only put like 50 euro in it. And maybe it makes the 5x, maybe she loses the money completely, but at the moment she wouldn't have the access to that market. And in the end, with a technology like blockchain and tokenization, you could build such markets. And that's what we're aiming for, to kind of be the place where people can sign up and where they see something new to invest in. And then you would find it on the platform.
Okay, and did you get your mom to sign up?
Well, I didn't treat her for now to do that. Actually, I should do it. My sister and her husband is registered for sure. But yeah, so in the end, I think also with all instruments that have a high volatility, I think it's people should also know a bit what they're doing. And I don't want to treat my mother like, hey, you're only a good mother when you trade on our platform. That would be definitely be unfair. But I also don't want to be responsible when she maybe makes like 10% minus on a day and is then angry on me.
Yeah, there's always a risk with a chance. Right? So if I remember that time correctly, then I sat in a restaurant once and the waiter was approaching me and said, "My friend, should I trade Bitcoin or not?" I think that pretty much reflects how it felt at that time, right?
Yeah, and this stuff has like a high risk return profile, and it would usually in traditional financial services be treated as a very risky investment class. And at the moment, when you go through the sign-up process at BSDEX, we have a lot of information and check marks so that people reflect what they're doing. But obviously, there are a lot of exchanges and players in the market who don't do that, and therefore it still has a bit of a Wild West. But the hope that comes with a platform like us, and a lot of people in the industry, especially in Germany, put a lot of hope into our platform, because with the name of Börse Stuttgart in it, and a tradition of 150 years of managing trading venues, and we also have some of the colleagues in our team who are with Börse Stuttgart since more than 20 years. And they are providing us with very deep knowledge on trading topics and how to organize markets and how to really create fair markets and so on. And this knowledge gets implemented into technology. And I think this is a huge benefit, because if you browse Wikipedia articles on trading topics, you will find a few information, but the whole topic is so much deeper. And you wouldn't find any documentation on it, because it's just collected over the years by some people, and therefore it's super valuable to have them on board.
So you basically are adopting a very complex topic, which has been a Wild West, and with traditional experience, hundreds of years of trading, you bring it to an understandable and also serious kind of nature, right?
Yeah, and for example, to make it a bit practical, we are making use of the market supervision, which is a team at Baden-Württembergische Wertpapierbörse GmbH, and these people kind of watch or supervise the markets also in the traditional world, and they also implemented us on our data feeds on their platform. So they are kind of like an external party watching us, that all trades that are happening on the platform, that they are really right, and that there's no illegal activity and so on and so forth. So we kind of bring this to this new sector.
There's one sentence I always keep on my mind: value is perception. And if you really think about it, I mean, why do you believe in money? Why do you believe that your bank account is correct, that the sum in your bank account is correct, and so on? I think like you can really have philosophical discussions for ages around that sentence, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in the end, so these I think this it's a bit comparable with also what we do with what I had mentioned a bit before on this topic, like making compliant or making this compliance as code at Solaris, so kind of translating compliance rules into technical processes that don't break the way you work, because for the start of BSTechs, it was super important to come up with a market model that so which is kind of the rule book, how trades are matched and so on. And so we came up with a concept also to have volatility interruptions, which is also kind of a mechanism, so like a circuit breaker in tech, when there's unusual activity, so that we can also halt trading, start an auction, so which is also like another way of finding a price, especially also when in a volatile market or in a illiquid market. And so we have these mechanisms that we build up also to protect the users and to actually also provide a great product to the users and customers. And that wouldn't be possible if we wouldn't have this full support by all these knowledgeable people from Börse Stuttgart, Baden-Württembergische Wertpapierbörse, Euwax, and all these companies that are connected to Börse Stuttgart, because this makes it a really unique product.
Okay, and to be a bit more concrete, as we want to talk about tech. So how does that look like? So how does your stack look like? What do you use? Are you still on Ruby on Rails, or how does it look today? And how does it look in a bank? How can I imagine that?
Yeah, so I'm still on Ruby on Rails, exactly, but only for specific parts. And in the end, I think and I think you will agree that in technology there are these let's say standard problems where you would find 7 different tools, and it's really you don't need to care about what tool you use, because it will solve the problem in almost the same way. And when it's about building, for example, a web application, just very simple, with a very simple architecture and kind of like in a database style, you will find for any common programming language, you will find frameworks, so like Ruby on Rails, and you will find these frameworks for each language, and then you will use what you're used to and where you have a lot of experience. And for me, it's Ruby and Ruby on Rails where I feel best. I would personally, so I'm not a radical on programming languages, so I would be open also for other frameworks. But in the end, you build up a team from scratch. You attract people that you know from the past, and so you already worked with Ruby on Rails together, and then this kind of becomes like an implicit decision. And we use Ruby on Rails for our admin interfaces and to provide the API to the users or to the user front end. The front end is built in React.js, so also pretty common approach these days. And as we need to transfer a lot of information in the user interface, because imagine it's a trading interface. So you have different order books. You have a multitude of orders. There are hundreds of users connected to that front end, and they are posting orders. They're deleting orders. So there's kind of a lot of information getting in, and then additionally there's the market maker who always posts orders, removes orders to keep the market running, so that there are also matches between the orders. So this is therefore React is a good tool to make to produce such a very interactive front end with a lot of kind of insertions, deletions in the DOM model, and the communication with the backend is through WebSockets, because of course the information needs to flow like almost real time. And let's say the very performance-driven backend parts, so which is we call it the trading engine. but it's in the end consisted of the different order books. So, for example, Bitcoin Euro, where you will find all the orders and then all the logic behind, so that orders get matched after specific rules. These components are written in Golang. As this needs to be super performant and also has a lot of engineering problems inside that I can also explain in a minute. And so that's kind of the part where we said, like, okay, so let's be a little bit more specific on the programming language, because with Ruby it wouldn't work out that well, because Ruby is also not fast enough on those purposes. But with Golang and Ruby, we feel pretty comfortable to have a language stack which kind of adds up to each other, because kind of the one language can also serve some value that the other language can serve.
Thanks a lot to our sponsor, the About You Cloud. The About You Cloud offers a full-stack e-commerce solution as a service that runs on exactly the same infrastructure as About You does. It is mobile-first, can act as headless system, event-driven, can be fully localized, and is super integratable into existing solutions. Besides that, it is designed and developed by a really smart CTO and friend of mine, Sebastian Betz, who also did the first Alphalist podcast with me. About You has set up a task force for retailers and brands that want to be quick in the COVID situation. This task force will help you with the launch of your shop, as well as with fulfillment, marketing, support, and internationalization. Simply write to hello@aboutyou.com to be supported by this task force. Don't you have the feeling that as of today, you mentioned that you attract people you know for a while, attract them as developers. Do they still feel comfortable with Ruby and Rails? I also would always pick that approach because of packages like active admin, for example, to generate an admin interface and so on is really important. But sometimes you realize that also those common problems really take ages if you do them in an old school way, and sometimes there are things that are there to accomplish them faster. Like for example, tools like internal I/O or Airtable and stuff like that, like the modern no-code tools. Does it make sense to still build something on a framework which is not, I would say, the most attractive one as of today?
I think it really depends on the problem that you want to solve with that technology. And in the end, there's, from my perspective, always more problems than only the technical requirements, because it's also about finding developers, moving fast in the beginning and so on, kind of build some sort of MVP. I know that the word MVP is kind of overused and in the end a very bad term from my perspective, but I see the term MVP still in the traditional sense, as it was meant also in Lean Startup, that it's the minimum viable product. And in technology, it's very difficult to find out what is viable. I just before we started the recording session here, I had a discussion with some people from our tech team, and it was about the introduction of a message broker. So probably most of the listeners found themselves in discussions like you have a first architecture, and so our first architecture was very HTTP driven. It's very simple and very very domain driven, and therefore it's very scalable at the moment for us. But then there is the one moment where you start the discussion on the message broker, and in these discussions, I always try to manage to bring all the aspects on the table, and then really find out, okay, so what is viable. And maybe first, in this situation, we decided to have a internal MVP first, so where we solve the problem that we have with in an isolated space with a message broker, and then we will have a joint discussion how we will follow up, if we, especially also in which in which direction we're going to iterate, because it for me an MVP could also mean, okay, nice experiment, but it doesn't fulfill the results that we expected, and therefore we go back to zero and start something different. And I think
or decide that we don't need a message broker at all.
Yeah, exactly. So I made a joke in a meeting that I said like, it took 38 minutes of talking that the word Kafka first time was mentioned. So because in the end, these discussions usually they start very small, then they become very big, like in a very just after half an hour, and then you need to refocus again. Okay, what do we actually want to achieve? And going back to Ruby, so for me it's like when I start with a product that has no code yet, no users, no employees, and no customers, then I think I first need to get to the point where I get this MVP status and where people start using it, and then I can find out where the real complexity is, and then find specific solutions for that. And kind of the level of sight that we had when we started was that we knew that this trading engine topic is super crucial for everything, and it would be incredibly expensive to have a rewrite, I don't know, a year later due to performance reasons. And therefore, we really focused on building a great system on that end. And in the end, maybe to explain a bit what the difficulty with a trading system is, it's you have different orders. These orders need to get matched by specific rules, so like a rule engine, and you will have it's sorted, and you might have also double orders, and then kind of the oldest one needs to get filled first. So which means you have like a data structure that has some hierarchy, and you need to have very quick insertions and deletions in there, because a user might make an order and delete it right after, or you have a trading bot that just like creates orders depending on how the market moves and how the spreads are. And this is even if you have only 2 users on the platform and 1 market maker, it's already a platform that has a quite decent amount of complexity, because you need to deal with that data structure. And so when we started, I was very happy that I had that friend I worked with also a couple of times, who is very deep in trading, but also very deep in tech topics. And we started this discussion how we can build the system up. And in the end, so he of course went like 3 levels deeper than me, but then he came up with like red black trees, and he kind of found the data structure that would treat our challenge the best way, and implemented it in Golang. And the second aspect of the trading engine is that it needs to be 100% consistent. Yeah, so it's you can of course keep data in memory, but if a trade happens, it of course has a financial aspect, and also there's some kind of ownership in an asset moving from one person to the other. So you can't be eventually consistent on such a topic, and therefore we took that approach to start with a very, very well thought of data structure on the one hand to handle this high load, and on the other side we decided to go for a Postgres database in the beginning, because at the moment databases still treat especially this aspect of consistency in the right way. And with that approach, even knowing so I know where discussions also go with engineers, it's like, oh, there's a database, so there will be a bottleneck. I can guarantee you, yes, of course. But we did performance testing on it quite intensively, because of course we also wanted to prove to the different stakeholders and license holders and so on that the approach that we choose is really working. And we kind of took the public order book of the big exchanges in the world and fired these requests on our trading engine, and it's holding it. Yeah, so we're able to manage a lot of requests and still know where we could do some more optimization and so on. And I think this was a very, very good approach, because I think we didn't take any compromise on the trading engine side. The React frontend is pretty well thought of, also with this WebSocket communication and kind of the connection to the backend. And if there would be the problem that we would need to exchange the backends for the front ends to another language, well, so now, like 1 year later, also after being live and having built some engineering team within the last time, I would say, like, okay, it would also be possible to switch the backend for the front end.
And the database away from Postgres to some other modern or more modern database, or would you say that it's that it all works and will work in the future?
So as mentioned, we did these performance tests, and we're with this construction. So of course, with some in-memory caching for the trading engine, we're able to handle a lot of requests and trades. So it's probably carrying us for a long time. And but I think the more important fact is that you, especially when you have a theory where a potential bottleneck can appear, that you have the right measures and tools to really measure it from the very beginning. Because I also like to use it as a way to deal in discussions, because obviously engineers also like to try out new stuff, and probably the more modern database is more interesting or more appealing, like something old like Postgres. But we really want to make sure that we take these decisions on on a data basis, yeah. So that we don't say like, oh, this is nice or this is cool, and so therefore let's try it out. So it really needs to serve a purpose, and therefore we stick to this approach with the Postgres database, and it's working perfectly for us.
Having such an old technology like Postgres also means that you have a very, very stable system. And 5 years ago, whenever that NoSQL hype started, you also quickly realized, okay, that's not like the end of MySQL and Postgres. So at least from my perspective, and I think now it kind of leveled against each other, and you would again, as of today, potentially pick a normal SQL database, right?
Yeah, and something like Postgres gives you a lot of guarantees, and that's super important for us. And because you can imagine, if we settle a trade the wrong way, that has a huge impact. It has a financial impact to a customer, and this would also be something that would catch the interest of the regulator as well. And therefore we don't want to experiment with something that we optimize prematurely. Yeah, so you could also create full consistency with other technology, or I don't know, you could even configure a Kafka that way. I don't know, yeah, but it would be a high engineering task, or like a big engineering task, and you would need to put 5 people on that topic instead of just solving it right away and then see where we go. And because there's probably also that other dimension for the trading engine side, because the way we build it right now, it's so kind of in the terminology of exchanges, it's a centralized exchange. So there's kind of there's the blockchain where the assets are stored, and there's a layer on top which is built by us where we call it the bookkeeping, but it's kind of the Bestandsführung, what user owns how many Bitcoins. So we built that layer on top, so kind of the accounting layer, and the trades are performed on this accounting layer. So therefore, we are able to settle trades faster than the Bitcoin blockchain, for example, can write blocks, because Bitcoin blockchain writes like around 8 to 10 minutes, therefore, so we're able to settle much faster. So that's the approach for today. So where would it be tomorrow? Yes, and tomorrow I'm pretty convinced, and this also attracts my technology enthusiasm a lot, because in the future I'm pretty sure that exchanges will be decentralized, and technology-wise, it's already possible. So there are exchanges who are dealing with tokens, where you can buy tokens on a decentralized exchange, and that's really fascinating, because this would also bring us much closer to this kind of like having the highest compliance in code that is possible, because there would be a piece of software that's accepting orders, matching it with a specific rule set, and then making the settlement on the blockchain. And at the moment, the blockchains are too diverse, because there are different implementations and also with different paradigms and so on. And also the performance of some of the blockchains is lacking. Obviously, there's, of course, regulatory aspects and so on that would prevent decentralized exchanges right now. But I think that everything will move there within the next 5, 10, 15 years, probably. And therefore, so we also need to then find the right point in time in the future when we're going to switch to a more decentralized approach.
Okay, but do you still need Börse Stuttgart if you have a decentralized exchange? Or does Börse Stuttgart then produce like some piece of code that you can download and use? Or how does that work then? I mean, where do you earn money then?
So I think, especially when it comes to fintech and trading and the regulatory side of it, that kind of technology opens a new way of doing something, and then the regulation needs to pick up. So remember that, like the times when there were only banks and no fintechs, so nobody thought about like what kind of licenses do I need to do specific service and so on, because it was more thought from the banking perspective. And nowadays there's these tiny startups doing some lending topics, some investment topics, like Trade Republic and so on, and so and therefore, and now everybody's discussing, okay, how should the European Union provide like a fintech framework that makes it easier for financial service company to start? And I think the same will happen in the trading space, and there we're kind of in the very beginning. So we've been part of the of a survey by the European Union, where it was about how MTFs, so like trading facilities, exchanges, need to look like in the future. And in the end, there's like a new technology approach there. It's not legal to use it right now, especially not in Germany, but kind of I think the next step is that the regulation will move a bit, then there will be a tiny part of technology more possible, and then it's like a zigzag approach that a few years later we will have these new approaches online and also in use, and kind of what the role of the different players will be. That's very hard to guess, but I think because you specifically asked for Börse Stuttgart, I think they still will be there and have some relevance, because we are now moving with a couple of projects in that space, and our intention is to stay relevant in the future, and therefore we're doing it.
But the future will be less about glossy bank buildings then, I guess.
I think so. Also due to Corona, now everybody working from home.
But back to you. So would you consider yourself the best engineer in your company?
No, definitely not. And also because I would be the bottleneck for everything. Yeah. So because in the end, I also follow the approach like hiring better people than me, because then I can focus on a different topic. So it's like so I always compare building up a company and a team like cell splitting. So there's first there's one cell, then there's two cells, then there's 3, 4, 5, and then you start to replicate. And in the end, in the beginning, you do something, you hire the next person, then you split your work, and then they split their work. And I use this metaphor quite often to explain what is happening in small teams that start up something from the scratch. And for me, it means so I get somebody a very seasoned engineer into the company to hand over a lot of my thoughts, and having somebody who's taking
your initial Rails code, right?
And so I'm really keeping hands off. So because I learned in my first company that I founded, because there was that one point in time when I realized that people were only waiting for me. It's like, hey, Peter, can you finish your task and then we can deploy? And so if you're a managing director and if you have other topics to coordinate, it's from my point of view, it's very stupid if you also produce a lot. Because in the end, my job is to delegate and to delegate to the right things, so that we don't waste time on stupid engineering discussions, that we spend it on the right things, that we don't over-engineer, that we still have a lot of foresight, kind of like where we're heading, and that we have a strategy also for our architecture and so on, and to keep the quality high, to not only focus on quality, because there's also always this trade-off between quality and quantity, which means like quality in code versus releasing new features to the user. So you also need to keep that trade-off going. So kind of for both sides actually. And so due to this fact that I can code and that I have a lot of knowledge in technology, but at the same time, I'm also nowadays the business guy and being responsible to run the business. That brings me in this, from my point of view, in this very lucky situation that I can manage both sides. And so as far as I digested from my engineers and other employees, I think everybody is very happy at the moment, because we have, for a company which is kind of formally founded 1 year ago, and the project is now going for 1.5 years. For a company of that age, we have a very high quality. And I'm like, when I come to the office or when I start working and when I have discussions with engineers and when we're talking about specific topics, I'm always I have a bit of shiver on my skin, because so we have built so many things in such a good and reliable way, and still we were moving fast and bringing a very complex, also legally complex product to the market in a very, very short amount of time. So that makes me very proud.
How autonomous is your team then? I guess I understood that you're quite autonomous and that you are rather hands-off in your daily work. But it also sounds like you have some core technologies that you also decided to have and you stick onto. You don't not everyone is using his own programming language. How does it look like in your team?
So the teams are built in an autonomous way. So at the moment we have 3 teams that deal with tech topics, and plus one, let's call it virtual team. And kind of maybe start with the virtual team, because this is kind of like a cross-functional team that appeared while working on our data platform. So I mentioned in the very beginning of the podcast that we built our data platform with AWS, and in the end. So the first use cases we surfaced it is to help the marketeers and the marketing and business development people to get the right reports, but also getting it in a way that it's that BI is not standing in your way all the time, because I've seen it in the past that BI kind of starts from, hey, give me access to the database tables, and then they do funky SQL statements, and then there's some reporting tool, and half a year later, it slows down the whole engineering because there are these strong dependencies and the data is wrong and so on. So I've seen interesting things in different companies, and so we started it again with an engineering approach from the scratch. So having proper roles so that the teams are the producers. They publish the data in specific formats, and these data sets can be consumed by consumers on AWS. And so we're working kind of in a cross-functional team on developing features on it because it's driven by the marketeers and business people, and kind of the engineers are working on it part-time. So the main teams are the two teams that are working on the product, so the platform, the trading platform, and it's a team that serves the front end, so the trading application, and then there's the team that handles this trading engine that I explained a little bit before, and we have a platform team. Maybe a few words to the platform team. Usually, I'm a big fan of this Google SRE approach, so having DevOps people or operations engineers within the development teams and kind of collaborating with them very closely. We had to build here kind of an independent team for that, because we built up the initial tech stack in the data center of Börse Stuttgart, and to come up with a Kubernetes setup and make it work and so on was a huge effort to build that foundation for the team so that they're able to roll out and so on. And therefore, it deserved an own team. On the long run, I will see also these people migrating into the development teams, because also our platform now has a pretty high stability and works pretty well. Therefore, we can more focus on the development topics. Yeah, and but regarding the way of working, because that's what was the original question. So for me, it's very important that the teams are independent and also can work in an autonomous way, because in the end they focus on their work the whole day, and I can only be present like in 1 or 2 meetings every week, and so I only get a share of the information, and therefore I believe that somebody who's investing more time with a specific topic will know much more about it than me. So that's the first aspect. And when it comes to kind of opinions that I have, and probably also experience that I made, and when I want to share them, I use touch points with different teams, also with the product side, but also with the engineers, to have conversations where we're heading, what are we currently doing, and then I'm bringing in my expertise and also my opinion to make sure that we're doing the right things.
But you still try to keep your stack clean. That's what I also meant. Like you try to not have like a zoo of languages, not have a zoo of databases, and so on. As far as I understood. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah. So it's so we will stay in this Ruby, JavaScript, Golang stack, and I'm pretty sure that we can cover everything with that stack.
Okay. Cool. And like coming a bit to the my favorite questions, as we already spent like quite a lot of time. Do you have a tool you really love right now? So something new, something shiny you just discovered you want to share?
Yes. And in the past, also in engineering or when building up companies, there was always this question around content management systems. And so kind of the people are, come on, let's quickly set up a WordPress, and then the problem is solved. And I'm not a WordPress fan at all. Maybe treating it wrongly that way, but these days, but kind of this remained in my head quite a lot. And also building something custom with Ruby on Rails, I also don't think that it's the right approach. So a couple of years back, I discovered that approach, having like a headless CMS system like Contentful and connecting it with a static site generator. We are now doing it since, so I did it before also at Solarisbank, and we're now also doing it at Börse Stuttgart Digital Exchange. And I think this is a very beautiful setup, because on the one hand, you still have a lot of flexibility when it comes to creating subpages and so on, and making it more complicated and so on. And the editors are able to insert the content and so on. That's very easy. But you're also able to move the content very quickly to a different technology platform, or it's even possible to reuse view components between the website and the applications behind. And so that's kind of that makes me happy every day.
So you're using Contentful with some sort of like Gatsby or Nuxt or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. And if you weren't like now solving, like with trading, solving a big problem and big technical challenge, which problem of mankind and humanity you would like to use with your tech superpowers these days if you weren't solving trading?
So I back in the days, I think it was in 2007, I wrote my master's thesis, and at the time there were discussions in the web community on the so-called social network portability. Which meant in these days there were all these social networks coming up like Facebook and LinkedIn and so on, and they were eating your data, and you were entering a lot of data there, but you were also adding friends on multiple platforms many times and so on. So a lot of back and forth, and I created a concept where the user can take over the governance for his or her data and make it available to the platform. So kind of to shift the approach like from one side to the other. And this now, a couple of years later, seeing decentralized systems like blockchains and also a lot of identity projects, plus the beloved GDPR also includes the right for data portability. And so I could imagine that I would use my superpowers to bring that concept that I theoretically created for my master thesis to bring it to life, because I would see a lot of value for people who are using the internet, and also seeing what happens in some other big and relevant industry states with censorship and also really making misuse of data. That would probably be the right point in time due to also the technology which is there, internet connection speed and so on and so forth, to make the world more decentralized, to be really also tamper-proof for like anything which might come from politics in the future.
So to put it in my short words, so if you weren't solving trading then, you would build a social network and attack Facebook and attack LinkedIn. Just joking. So very nice talking to you, Peter. Thanks a lot for being here and spending time with me. We could have talked for hours, I guess. But for a podcast, I think 45 minutes to 60 minutes are the best time. So let's now end the discussion and like meet again and maybe discuss a little deeper on banking then and fintech then. Really a pleasure to have you here, and looking forward to further discussions. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks again to our sponsors Fastly and the About You Cloud. If you want to get first-class support by Fastly, just go to fastly.com/alphalist. And if you want to launch your shop and get first-class support by About You, just write an email to hello@aboutyou.com to be supported by their task force.